Hello, welcome. In this video, you will hear a perfect pirate story. While three outlaws whispered in a dimly lit tavern, fate had already set in motion. What they discussed was not merely gold. It was a treasure hidden in the depths of the sea and a cursed map pointing to it. When Silas overheard this conversation, the first step of an irreversible journey had been taken. A stolen flagship, captured soldiers, unexpected alliances, and battles drenched in blood. This story tells of how those who set out for gold lost their destinies on the fine line between betrayal and loyalty. Captain Silas, who had spent his years wrestling with rough seas, every line on his face carved by salt water and sun, sat alone in the darkest and noisiest tavern of Portsmouth Harbor. He cared little for the taste of the stale beer in the mug before him. His attention was fixed on the three strangers whispering at the table just behind him. With the instinct born of long experience, Silas lowered his head and pulled the brim of his hat down. He looked half asleep, yet he was etching every word into his memory. "I'm telling you, Jack," said the skinniest of the men, his voice trembling with excitement. "In the attic of that old, abandoned customs building at the port, I found a hidden compartment wedged between the beams. This parchment came out of it." The larger, more skeptical man slammed his mug onto the table. "Nonsense! What business would a full-blown treasure map have sitting in an empty building right in the middle of the city, where anyone can walk in and out? If it were a real map, someone would have gotten their hands on it long ago." The third man, sharp-eyed, clearly the leader of the group, leaned forward and lowered his voice even further. "Listen carefully. This map doesn't point to an ordinary place. In the corner of it are the coordinates of a hidden island in the Broken Fang archipelago. That building once belonged to a merchant who laundered pirate goods. Seems the pirates hid the map to the real loot on land, in that dusty building no one would bother checking, to avoid being caught at sea. Keeping the treasure on the island makes far more sense than guarding it in an unprotected building." At these words, Silas's eyes gleamed. The Broken Fawn was the most dangerous, most cursed, yet most promising region of the open seas. A mysterious map found in a building, leading to an island out in the vast ocean. This idea rang true to him. These men clearly knew nothing about the sea, nor how to survive in those deadly waters. Silas dragged his chair forward with a creak and settled himself at the head of the table. "The Broken Fawn archipelago?" he said, his voice rasping like a rusted chain. "If you sail into those waters without a captain who knows how to read a map, you won't find the island. You'll become part of the real treasure at the bottom of the sea, boys." The three men didn't look frightened at all. If anything, they stared at Silas as if he were a cockroach. The larger one moved his hand toward the weapon beneath the table, while the leader straightened in his seat, studying the scars on Silas's face and the sailor's tattoos etched into his skin. "People who sit at our table uninvited don't tend to live long in this port, Captain," the leader said coldly. "The map is in our hands. The coordinates are right in front of us. What use do you think an old drunk like you could be to us? We don't need directions, we need you out of our way." Unbothered by the tension at the table, Silas cast a brief sideways glance at the map lying in the center. "Coordinates look nice on paper," he said calmly. "But the currents around the Broken Fog change direction every month. The man who drew that map didn't just leave a route, he left a timing trap. If you approach that island in the wrong month, with the wrong wind, your ship will be smashed against the rocks like a paper toy. You need someone who knows this business. And I need a crew." The big man was still unconvinced. "If we've got the map, why should we take you along? What use are you to us? We could silence you right here and be on our way." Silas grinned faintly. "You could silence me. But there's no one else in this port who can provide you with a ship capable of passing through the Siren Strait at the island's entrance. And that map you found in the building is probably protected by a cipher. Why do you think everyone who looted that place before came back empty-handed? Because reaching the island isn't enough, you have to survive once you're there." The leader motioned for his companion to pull his hand away from his weapon. He had realized that Silas's experience might be worth more than a route drawn on paper. "You said you have a ship?" the leader said, narrowing his eyes. "Where is it? And why should we share this treasure with you?" To ease their suspicion, Silas leaned back and smiled with quiet confidence. "My ship is right here in the harbor," he said. "There's just one small complication." The leader frowned. "What kind of complication?" Silas lowered his voice and continued in a sorrowful tone, as if he had suffered a great injustice. "Because of a little dispute with the harbor master, my ship was wrongfully seized. It's sitting at the pier right now, bound under heavy chains. I need a few strong men to help me get her out of there. You help me reclaim my ship, and I'll take you to that island." In truth, Silas didn't even own a dinghy in the harbor. His plan was simple: to pass off one of the fastest galleons he had his eye on as his ship, and trick the trio into stealing it for him. The men exchanged glances. Silas went on. "And I'm not greedy when it comes to the share. In return for getting my ship back and delivering you to the island, I'll take only 1/5 of whatever treasure we find. The rest, the larger share, will be yours." 1/5 was a very small cut for a treasure of that magnitude. The men's greed began to overtake their reason. The leader clasped Silas's hand. "Very well, Captain. We'll recover your ship. But if you try to deceive us, we'll carve that 1/5 share onto your gravestone." When Silas left the tavern briefly to arrange a few things, the three men were left alone at the table. The big man snarled, staring at the door Silas had just walked through. "Are we really going to give a share to this old lizard? Even 1/5 is too much for that fossil." The leader refilled his mug with a cold smile. "Easy, Jack. He thinks we don't know a thing about sailing, but he's mistaken. He'll run the ship until he gets us to the island. The moment we set foot exactly where the map points, Silas's 1/5 will end up in the stomachs of the sharks at the bottom of the sea. We get rid of him on our first night on the island. Then both the ship and the treasure are ours." Silas and the men left the table with an agreement to meet again at the same tavern the next day at noon to finalize their plans. Silas strode out of the tavern with confident steps, as if heading for his own ship. But the moment he turned the street corner, he slowed down and slipped toward the darkest parts of the harbor. Midnight had fallen, and the weak glow of the harbor lanterns danced across the waves. Moving like a shadow along the pier, Silas began searching for the most suitable prize. At last, at the very end of the dock, he spotted a sleek yet sturdy galleon, the Sea Raven. The ship was fast and drew shallow enough water to navigate the treacherous shallows of the broken Fawn. Silas moved closer to inspect her. He noticed that only 2 drunken sentries were passed out on deck, and a single lantern burned in the captain's cabin. "Perfect for us," he muttered. "Few men, plenty of speed." The next day, as the noon sun warmed the harbor, Silas arrived at the agreed meeting point. Before he could even offer a greeting, the group's big man, Jack, grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the wall. The sharp-eyed leader stepped directly in front of Silas and stared him down with an icy expression. "Do you take us for fools, Captain?" the leader said, his voice low enough that no one else could hear, yet sharp enough to cut into Silas's bones. "We followed you last night. We watched you skulk around the Sea Raven like a rat. That ship isn't yours. It belongs to a merchant who works for the crown. You lied to us." Despite the powerful hand crushing his throat, Silas didn't lose his composure. He coughed lightly and met the leader's gaze with a crooked smile. "A lie?" Silas said calmly. "I told you we'd get that ship out of there. I never said the deed was in my pocket. Listen, son, you've got a map in your hands, but you don't even have a dinghy under your feet. That ship is the fastest in this harbor, and right now it's guarded by no more than a handful of men. What difference does it make whether it's mine or not? The moment we steal it, it becomes ours." Silas paused for a moment, then delivered his strike. Do you know anyone else in this port who can slip that ship out of here quietly and get you to the island on that map alive? No. So don't focus on my lie. Focus on the outcome. Do you want the treasure or do you want an honest captain? The leader fell silent, weighing the resolve in Silas's eyes. Then he gestured to Jack to let him go. As Silas dropped to the ground and straightened his clothes, the leader leaned forward. Very well, Captain. If that's how you want to play it, we accept. We'll steal the ship tonight. But since the ship isn't yours, there will be a price for your lie. Once we find the treasure and the job is done, the ship will be ours. You'll take your share and be put ashore. Agreed? Silas thought, of course, if you're still alive by then, but outwardly he only nodded. Agreed. Now listen carefully. I'll tell you exactly how we're going to get aboard that ship. In the pitch-black night, the harbor waters lay so still that not a single or stroke could be heard. Silas and the three men approached the Sea Raven silently from the water in a small stolen boat. At Silas's signal, grappling hooks flew. The dull clang as the iron tips caught the rail was swallowed by the soft lapping of the waves. Silas climbed the rope with a cat's agility and was the first to set foot on the deck. The others followed, gliding up behind him. There were only 3 sentries on deck, one dozing near the stern, another staring out to sea with a pipe in his mouth. Slipping out of the shadows, Silas and his men crept up behind them. With a single blow each, they knocked the guards unconscious and gagged them. That was too easy, Jack whispered, a smug grin spreading across his face. At that very moment, the cargo hatch creaked open. Silas's estimate of 2 or 3 men was shattered in an instant. One armed sailor burst out, then 5, then a total of 15. It turned out the ship was the flagship of a merchant convoy scheduled to sail the next day, and the entire crew was inside, fully prepared. "Boarders!" one of the men shouted. The dark deck exploded into the clash of steel and shouting voices. Silas drew the heavy cutlass at his belt and parried the first 2 attackers. Despite his age, he moved like a storm, driving an elbow into one man's throat while sweeping another's legs out from under him and hurling him overboard. The 3 men at Silas's side plunged into the fight with savage determination. The hulking Jack grabbed 2 sailors and smashed their heads together, while the sharp-eyed leader wielded his sword with skill, forcing the crew back. "On the sails!" Silas roared, twisting away from the blow of the first mate and slamming the man into the mainmast. "Cut the anchor loose! Now!" In the middle of the chaos, Silas fought with one hand while barking orders with the other. "Jack, free the lines on the mainsail! You, take the helm!" Some of the crew were knocked unconscious and lay sprawled across the deck, while others were forced to retreat under Silas's fearless assault. At that very moment, a sharp siren tore through the silence of the harbor. The watchman in the harbor tower had spotted the ship's movement and the fight on deck. "The idiots are awake!" the leader shouted, grabbing the helm. "Come on, boys, let's get the wind at our backs!" Silas roared. The sails billowed at once, and the Sea Raven began to pull slowly away from the harbor. As harbor soldiers sprinted toward the pier, the ship was already slipping into the darkness of the open sea. The wailing sirens and shouted orders faded behind them, swallowed by the sound of the waves. Silas wiped the blood from his cutlass and stared toward the horizon, in the direction of the broken fawn. As they took control of the ship, Silas and his crew went to great lengths to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. This was Silas's one rule on the seas. The dead don't talk, but the living can be bargained with. Of the 10 men on deck, they bound the hands and feet of the 5 they deemed useful and locked them in the darkness of the hold. The rest were set adrift near the shore, close enough to swim back to the harbor. Once the ship had put the harbor far behind and reached the calm swells of open water, things finally settled. Silas took the helm while the others collapsed onto the deck. The leader's name was Alistair, the skinny, cunning one was Barnaby, the brute, of course, was Jack. Several days passed. The sky was a flawless blue, and the wind blew exactly the way they wanted. Alistair stepped up beside Silas and unfolded the map once more. "Look, Silas," he said, his voice softer than it had been on the first day. "This map is taking us exactly where we need to go. But I'm curious, why don't you ever kill anyone? Out here, mercy is weakness." Silas smiled as he studied the horizon. "The sea loves the smell of blood, Alistair. Once it gets a taste, it never lets go. On my ship, there'll be nothing but the scent of wind." Barnaby chimed in as he sharpened a rusty knife. "And what if we run into soldiers? The Sea Raven is a flagship. She's still flying that grand banner. Everyone will think we're the king's executioners." Just then, Jack's voice rang out from the top of the mast. "Sure IP. Starboard side, sail in sight." On the horizon, a massive vessel with pitch-black sails appeared. It was the Black Widow, owned by one of the most vicious pirates in the region. With its admiral's flag and soldiers' uniforms still visible, the ship Silas and his men rowed looked exactly like a pirate hunter. The pirates assumed the towering vessel had come to hunt them down. Before Silas could even shout, "Lower the flag!" the gun ports along the enemy ship's side burst open with a thunderous roar. Without waiting for a soldier's attack, the pirates made the first move. Boom! A massive cannonball detonated in the water just ahead of the Sea Raven, sending up a violent plume. The ship shuddered as rain-like sheets of spray slammed down onto the deck. Silas made his decision the instant a second shot rattled the hull. "Raise the white flag!" he roared. Barnaby, one of the rogues on deck, scrambled up the mast with shaking hands to hoist the white cloth, the universal sign of surrender. But the pirate ship didn't slow. On the contrary, the captain of the Black Widow took it as a ruse, a soldier's trick meant to lure them closer. Boom! The second blast tore into the Sea Raven's stern rail. Timber exploded outward, and the ship listed hard to one side. The damage wasn't critical, but the pirates had no intention of stopping. "Damn it! They don't understand peace," Silas snarled through clenched teeth. "Alistair! Jack! Man the guns! It's time to prove you're outlaws. Ready the 2 cannons on the starboard side, now!" At Silas's command, the men rushed to the heavy cast-iron guns. Jack hauled powder barrels with his massive arms while Alistair worked the aim. But before taking the firing match, Alistair ran to Silas, his eyes fixed anxiously on the enemy ship. "Listen to me, Captain!" Alistair shouted over the thunder of the guns. "If they don't break off, the 4 of us can't defend a ship this size alone. That vessel is packed with pirates. If things turn bad, we'll have to use the prisoners below. Cut them loose and tell them if they don't fight for this ship, they'll drown with it. We don't have any other choice." Silas hesitated. Trusting prisoners was like playing with fire atop a powder keg. But Alistair was right. They couldn't stand against 50 men with only 4. "For now, answer them with the guns," Silas said, wrenching the helm hard over. "If they try to board, we open the hold. Until then, show them how hard this ship can bite. Fire!" At Silas's command, Jack and Barnaby took their positions at the cannons. On the deck of the Black Widow, nearly 20 pirates could be seen preparing for an assault. They still held the numbers, but they weren't invincible. "Fire!" Silas bellowed. Boom! Jack's first shot blasted out of the Sea Raven's hull in a thick cloud of smoke and clipped the foremast of the pirate ship. The pirates hadn't expected such a fast and brutal response. They hesitated for a heartbeat, then recovered and reached for their rifles. Alistair rushed back to Silas with another warning. 20 men, all professional killers. And there are only 4 of us, Captain. If we don't bring the 10 soldiers up from below, the moment they throw grappling hooks we'll be overrun. I need to make them an offer. Either they fight with us and live, or they stay locked in that hold and drown under pirate cannon fire. Silas steered the ship with practiced skill, thinking it over for a split second. The pirates were steadily closing the distance, preparing to come alongside and board. "Very well, Alistair," Silas said. "Go talk to their leader. But remember, get their word that their guns will be pointed only at the pirates. If they betray us, I'll throw them into the sea with my own hands." Alistair sprinted for the hatch. Below, he laid the situation out for the bound soldier's leader. "There are 20 bloodthirsty pirates about to board this ship. Either you help us defend her, or when the pirates take her, they'll feed every last one of you to the sharks. What do you say, soldier?" The soldier's leader, Lieutenant Miller, was not just a soldier but a sharp man who understood the value of life and the sea. As Alistair moved to cut their bonds, Miller stopped him and locked eyes with him. "Listen to me," Miller said, his voice cutting clearly through the thunder of the guns. "If we win this fight and drive the pirates off, do you give me your word that you won't touch my men, that you'll put us ashore safely at the first port? We're men of our word, but we expect the same in return." Without hesitation, Alistair extended his hand. "You have my word, Lieutenant. We've got no quarrel with you. Our business is the treasure on that island. Now let me cut you loose." The moment the bonds were cut, Miller and his 10 soldiers rose from the darkness of the hold like ghosts stepping into daylight. The instant Miller set foot on deck, he scanned the scene with a professional eye and ran straight to Silas at the helm. "Captain," Miller shouted, "sailing may be your trade, but gun batteries and battlefield order are mine. Leave the command to me, just make this ship dance." Seeing the unshakable confidence in Miller's eyes, Silas nodded. "The command is yours, Lieutenant. The ship is at your disposal." At Miller's orders, soldiers and outlaws began moving as a single force. Studying the pirate ship's maneuvers, Miller barked commands. "Port guns, target the foremast. Hold now. Captain, hard to port." Silas heeled the massive ship to port like a swan, and 2 cannonballs fired by the pirates whistled past her hull by inches before plunging into the sea. Before every shot, Silas timed his maneuvers perfectly, slipping the ship out of harm's way. Miller thundered again. "Now! All batteries, fire!" The famed crossfire Miller had calculated with military precision paid off. Cannonballs burst through the smoke rolling off the Sea Raven's flank and slammed straight into the Black Widow's waterline and the base of her mainmast. With a deafening crack, the pirate ship's mainsail collapsed, and the vessel began to list heavily. "They've lost maneuverability," Miller said, peering through his spyglass. "They can't advance anymore." The pirates were stunned. The clumsy, soldier ship they thought they were facing had suddenly transformed into a master-built engine of war. Silas grinned at the helm and slowly guided the ship away from the wreckage. Alistair was deeply impressed by the flawless military discipline on deck and Miller's strategic brilliance. The outlaws whispered among themselves in a quick council. Keeping such a capable unit locked in the hold would be a terrible waste on the open sea. Alistair approached Lieutenant Miller with a new proposal. "Look, Lieutenant, we've seen that your bugles and rifles do a better job than our brute force. We're hunting a treasure. If you provide security along the way, use your weapons for us, and man the oars to give this ship speed, we'll give you and your men a full 1/5 of whatever treasure we find. You'll survive, and when you retire, you'll live like kings." Miller gave his men a brief glance. In every pair of eyes burned the same thought: better to fight for a fortune than remain prisoners in the middle of the ocean. Miller nodded. "We accept, Alistair. But understand this: if we do this, we can no longer act as men of the law. We won't be lawmen anymore. We'll be crew of this ship." Silas was more than pleased with the decision. He left the helm, strode to the center of the deck, and began barking his first orders in his booming voice. "If we're one crew now, then shed your old skins. Throw those red coats and shiny buttons into the sea, now. I don't want anyone mistaking us for soldiers from a distance. I'm tired of being a target. Put on the civilian clothes and sailor vests from the hold." Within minutes, 11 soldiers cast their heavy military uniforms into the depths. Then Silas pointed up at the Admiral's flag flying proudly from the mast. "And haul down that scrap of cloth. We don't work for the king anymore, we work for ourselves." When the flag came down, the Sea Raven was no longer a ship of the state. She had become an unnamed hunter, crewed by outlaws, former soldiers, and one old wolf of a pirate, racing toward fortune. With the rhythmic pull of the soldiers at the oars, the ship cut through the water faster than ever, gliding toward the horizon and the broken Fang archipelago. As the Sea Raven sliced through the waves under the combined power of hard rowing and a stiff wind filling her sails, the lookout at the top of the mast shouted in excitement, "Land ho! Broken Fang dead ahead!" The cry sent a wave of celebration across the deck. Alistair, Jack, and Barnaby embraced one another, while the former soldiers began counting the gold they had yet to claim. Silas studied the map, then the hazy silhouette on the horizon. "One day's sail left, boys," he said. "If the wind holds, our feet will touch shore before the sun sets tomorrow." But as they drew closer, the sea's deep blue shifted into an ominous turquoise. Just beneath the surface, ancient coral reefs rose like the teeth of some colossal beast, thousands of years old. They encircled the island like an impenetrable fortress wall. The sound of waves crashing and foaming against the razor-sharp coral rang out like a warning. Alistair, Miller, and the others leaned over the rail, staring into the deadly maze below. The slightest touch would be enough to tear the hull open like paper. One by one, they all turned to look at Silas at the helm. Miller stepped up beside him and placed a hand on the captain's shoulder. His voice carried a gravity none of them had heard before. "Captain, this is where our fate is decided. Neither cannons nor rifles will help us against these rocks. 15 lives, our dreams, and this ship are now entirely in your hands. If we scrape even a single reef, we'll all be fish food at the bottom of this beautiful sea." Alistair moved closer to the helm as well. "You said you knew the way, Silas. Now's the time to prove it. We're all in your hands." Silas tightened his grip on the wheel. His eyes narrowed as he read the subtle shifts in color on the water's surface and the pull of the currents beneath. A bead of sweat rolled down his brow. This wasn't just a test of seamanship, it was a trial of survival. "Everyone to your stations," Silas roared. "Rowers, keep pace with my count only. Reef the sails to half. We're threading a needle here. Hold your breath if you have to." As the sun sank toward the horizon, nature suddenly turned against them. The sky darkened beneath coal-black clouds, and the wind that had carried them this far twisted into a beast intent on hurling the ship onto the rocks. Rain lashed the deck like a whip, and towering waves exploded against the coral, reducing visibility to nothing. "Storm!" Jack shouted, clinging to the mast. "We can't squeeze through that needle hole in this weather. Turn back." Silas was locked to the helm as if fused to it. His beard had turned ghost white with the salt of the storm, and his eyes, sharp as an eagle's, were fixed on the dark shapes moving beneath the water. "There is no turning back," Silas roared. "We pass through now, or this storm smashes us to splinters on these rocks. All hands to the lines. Rowers, full power on the port side." As the ship crested a massive wave, a jagged tower of coral rose directly ahead. The crew screamed in terror, feeling death's cold breath at their necks. But in that exact instant, Silas threw the helm hard over, and the great galleon heeled gracefully, like a swan in motion. The ship passed so close that everyone heard the chilling scrape of coral teeth grazing the hull, but not a single splinter broke free. Within the hull of the storm, Silas seemed to smell the currents, to feel the ship's weight and guide her by instinct. Lieutenant Miller and Alistair watched the captain with expressions caught between horror and awe. Silas wasn't merely steering the ship, he was breathing with her. Right, then left, slipping between towering waves, he carried them through the deadly coral maze without a single mistake. The moment they entered the island's natural harbor, the storm died as if halted by a magical hand. The sea went dead calm. The sea raven glided slowly toward a shore of pure white sand. When the ship came to a halt, a deep silence fell. Then Miller stepped forward, watching Silas's trembling hands release the wheel. He snapped a sharp salute. After him came Alistair and the other outlaws, and then every soldier removed his hat and bowed their heads before Silas. What they felt now was no longer obligation, it was pure respect. The key that had opened the ocean's most dangerous gate was Silas's genius. "I've never seen or heard of anyone like you, Captain," Alistair said quietly. "You gave us more than a path, you gave us our lives. We all owe you." Silas nodded, weary but dignified. He gestured toward the shore. "You'll pay your debt when we find the treasure on this island, lads. There it is. Broken Fawn." Before them stood the legendary island, hidden behind towering trees and dense jungle, echoing with birdsong yet wrapped in a deep, unsettling silence. The team disembarked and moved quietly across the sand before beginning the climb toward the highest hill at the island's center. Hearts pounding, they expected to see golden domes or colossal temples beyond the ridge. But when they reached the summit, their steps slowed, and excitement gave way to stunned disbelief. This is impossible," Jack muttered, letting his oar fall from his hands. There was no endless forest before their eyes, no magnificent ruins rising from the earth. From the hilltop, the island looked almost empty. At the very center of a dusty plain of barren soil stood only 5 or 6 ancient trees. Yet these trees were not scattered like seeds cast by chance. They had been placed with mathematical precision. Alistair pulled the map from his pocket, and with trembling hands, compared it to the arrangement of the trees. From above, their trunks formed 2 perfect, interlocking triangles. It resembled the symbol alchemists and ancient sailors called the Seal of Solomon. But here it stood in the heart of nature, formed by living trees. The map wasn't pointing to a place, it was describing a shape, Alistair said, his eyes shining. "Look, the exact point where the triangles intersect, that's the heart of the geometry." The crew rushed down from the hill toward the strange clearing. Alistair stepped onto the precise center where the 2 triangles met. The soil there carried a scent unlike anything they knew, sharp and metallic. "Here!" Alistair shouted. "Jack, Miller, get the men together. We dig right here." Each strike of the shovels echoed unnaturally. After nearly 2 hours of backbreaking labor, Jack's shovel struck something hard and metallic. Clang. Everyone froze. They dropped to their knees and began clearing the dirt with their hands. Beneath the soil lay the lid of a massive chest, its surface resembling stainless steel, etched with strange runes. The chest was so enormous that it was obvious its contents could make the entire crew, and their descendants, wealthy beyond imagination. With a final heave from Jack and Miller, the lid groaned open like a beast awakening from a 1,000-year sleep. A blinding brilliance spilled out, as if the sun itself had fallen into the chest. It was filled to the brim with pure gold coins, diamond-inlaid goblets, and priceless necklaces. Yet what caught everyone's attention was a cylindrical silver tube resting on top. When Alistair opened it, 3 ancient scrolls slid out, new treasure maps, each pointing to a different corner of the world. While the others stood mesmerized by the hypnotic glow of gold, Silas stepped forward. He sat beside the chest, not looking at the treasure, but at the faces of the men he had fought beside, shoulder to shoulder. "Look at it," Silas said, his voice softer than ever before. "For this yellow metal, we could slit each other's throats. That was the plan, wasn't it? Leave me on the island, shark food." Alistair and Miller hesitated, exchanging a glance. Alistair lowered his head with an embarrassed smile. "I won't lie, Captain," he said. "At first, we saw you as nothing more than a tool. Once the job was done, we planned to give you your 1/5, and then toss you back into the sea. Miller joined in as well. We're soldiers too, Captain. Discipline is everything to us, but the gold clouded our judgment. We won't deny that we considered leaving you on the island and taking the ship for ourselves. Silas burst out laughing. The honesty didn't anger him. On the contrary, it put him at ease. I'm no different from you, Silas said, narrowing his eyes. I told you the ship was mine, but the truth is I let it be stolen and talked my way into becoming captain. We all got here by deceiving one another. But in that storm, I realized something. We're no longer strangers trying to outwit each other. Lieutenant Miller stepped forward, saluting both his men and Silas's crew. He raised his sword high and thundered the famous phrase once used in the British Royal Navy to declare loyalty between soldiers, a phrase that still lives on in maritime tradition today. One and all! Alistair, Jack, and the others raised their swords and tankards in return, answering the ancient salute. Old hostilities gave way to an unbreakable bond. Silas returned to the helm, the crew threw themselves into the oars, and the Sea Raven set sail beyond the horizon, toward the unknown promised by the new maps. Steady as she goes, boys! Steady as she goes!